Around a week back, I uploaded my all-time favourite Commodore 64 games video. It surprised many people that it didn't include the generic YouTube top 10 games for this system. I was pretty much from the early 90s side of Commodore 64 gaming, although I did actually play a fair few re-releases from the 80s era on the Hit Squad label. I rediscovered Commodore 64 in my 20s with a particular game that is actually listed in this video. I am pretty sure I came across it by accident, but soon discovered that Commodore 64 games were in fact still a thing, like they still are as of recording this video here in 2025. It made sense. 8-bit microcomputer games could be programmed by a single person or just a few people, for more ambitious games that is. Now, Matthew Smith, who single-handedly created one of the ZX Spectrum's best-selling games, proved this back in 1984 with Jet Set Willy. So if you have an interest in a particular computer, then why stop? If you are good at something, why stop at all? Just because it's an aged computer doesn't mean anything. Best of all, this era of gaming didn't require office floors full of people working on a single game like it is today. Now, thankfully, veterans from the 1980s dabble with new games on this 1982 technology, as well as new people learning to code in either basic or assembly language. The added ability of programming with emulators such as the Vice emulator is even more efficient for modern day aftermarket C64 games, and this is what many will do. If you have just realised that the Commodore 64 still has a massive fan base, welcome aboard. There is a hell of a lot of games, new games that is, some even complete in physical media form or digital media for you to play on an emulator. Personally, I play mine on my fully customised modern looking Commodore 64 setup through the latest Ultimate 2 Plus cartridge, so this was a struggle in compiling just 20 of my favourite modern day Commodore 64 games. If you haven't checked out my original top 10 favourite games, check out that one after this video. It will give you an insight into how much this system truly means to me. Pac-Man Worlds was originally released by Cytronic back in 2017. It's a game that I often play when I fancy firing up my Commodore 64. The version you are seeing in the gameplay footage is the recently released Pac-Man Worlds MC. Now, this is actually an enhanced and multicolour version of the game, as the original looked much like a ZX Spectrum game, although regardless it was a great game anyways. It pretty much plays the same. If I could explain this game, I would say a hybrid of Metroidvania style in Pac-Man. Obviously everything here is very much Pac-Man with the heads you play and the ghosts. It's a $2.99 digital download, as well as originally having a physical release with some awesome music and great smooth gameplay added. The idea is to make your way through 340 screens and to collect keys which will help you progress further whilst collecting all kinds of goodies in extra lives along the way. We have a quality Protovision release with the Curse 2, this one released in 2023. Now, admittedly, it's not as visually stunning as some other games in this list, but the gameplay is a top-notch puzzler. It is a basic concept of using a joystick to make your Indiana Jones style sprite get to the exit of each stage whilst collecting every goodie in between. Once you press up, down, left or right, you cannot stop until you either hit a wall, which doesn't kill you, in which case you can then choose another direction to guide yourself to the exit. The game starts off fairly simple, relatively speaking, but by stage 7 you will be struggling with blind spots and not knowing which direction isn't going to end your adventures. It's an awesome game, this one. You can actually buy this from Protovision direct or go to their itch.io store where you can actually buy a digital copy of it. For those who want physical media such as disc and cartridge, head over to their website. Ooze the Escape, released in 2023 by Bubblesoft. You might be familiar with this specific version, or maybe another version. I am pretty sure the Commodore 64 version was the first port of what was originally the ZX Spectrum game. This one actually released on multiple platforms over time, even the Amiga had a version of it. So it's an absolutely free game, and it has the Spectrum look about it still with the C64 release. It does play extremely well, and it's especially a game if you have patience to wait around for some time for things not to harm you. You play the game in an underground facility, and the aim is to collect various keycards, which are used to activate terminals to gain access to different parts of the game, obviously to escape the facility. That's the overview of it. It's a tough but rewarding game, complete with an on-screen map to pinpoint where you are in the game. You can download this one for free from itch.io. Without a doubt, Lester could easily be regarded as at least an 8-bit console-like game through its visuals and cuteness. It plays much like a Metroidvania game with over 60 different rooms to explore. We can use computer terminals to upgrade weapons, but only if we collect enough money by killing robots to do so. We can access terminals to establish where we are in the game with maps. It's a very cute game that I think is a little underrated and not much talked about. It's very smooth to play and awesome to control too. It is a time consumer much like any other Metroidvania style game, but for a free game from itch.io from 2023, Lester by BOBR Games is very much worth trying out. Now, I'm pretty sure that the coder intentionally designed Eye of the Gods like it was from the classic era Commodore 64 gaming, with a more basic look rather than overly colourful rounded off. Eye of the Gods, released by Cytronic back in 2016, is a fairly simple game, although will require you walking around to find upgrades that will allow you to access other parts of the game. I have always enjoyed playing this game whenever I feel that Commodore 64 gaming urge. It's got a great soundtrack and plays a little basic, but like I said, I'm sure that was the intention. Nevertheless, a great game, and people enjoy Metroidvania style gaming will likely enjoy this one. Grab it off itch.io for $2.99 or head over to Cytronic to see if they have any physical copies left of this game. Corescape released in early 2024 and was released by C64 Micro Action. Not only is this a fast-paced and really nicely coloured vertical shooter that has amazing parallax scrolling and some seriously great music composed for the SID chip to blast out whilst you're playing it, it's one of those games that you will die very quickly, but will want to keep coming back for more to see how the rest of the game looks. This game appeared out of nowhere, and I remember uploading it on my channel at the time to tell others about how great this was. It's a free download too, in digital form obviously. Even if you aren't a fan of this genre, it's worth loading up just for the music alone. Absolutely outstanding stuff, what the SID chip can actually produce. Nixie the Glade Sprite was originally a ZX Spectrum game, which then got ported to the Commodore 64. I love the fine detail in this game with its high resolution graphics. There's almost a nostalgic look, and it reminds me of the game Firelord, which came out in the 1980s for some reason. This one released in 2021 by Cytronic. It has recently received a sequel titled Nixie the Seeds of Doom, but to be honest, I haven't played much of it yet. Although this game is a great exploration game, we guide Nixie through the game and ultimately looking to cleanse a stone that has been corrupted by evil. The music in this game is awesome, and by far is one of my personal modern day favourite Commodore 64 tunes. This one is a freebie, and there was physical media available for this one, if Cytronic hasn't already sold out on the disc editions yet, that is. Next up, we have got Metal Dust. This game from Protovision, which released way back in 2005. It's one of those only games that supports the Super CPU expansion for the Commodore 64, so it is partially debated if this should actually even qualify as a C64 game, as it needs additional CPU power and extra RAM to power it. However, it runs on a stock Commodore 64 and was sold as a Commodore 64 game, providing you have that Super SPU attached, obviously. This is a seriously hardcore horizontal shoot 'em up. I kind of compare this as a new take on the early 90s game, Full Metal Mega Blaster, although this is much tougher. Although we can change difficulty to easy with this game, this is a seriously hardcore tough game, like insanely difficult. If you want to play this and don't have a super CPU, it's likely more playthrough emulation anyways. Just make sure super CPU is selected if you're using Vice, and make sure to have at least 4 meg of RAM chosen too. An original super CPU for a Commodore 64 are much like gold dust, and if you do find one, I'd hate to think how much those things go for today. We have another fairly hardcore horizontal shoot 'em up here with X-Force. This was developed by veteran Commodore 64 programmer Richard Bayless in 2014. Cytronic published this one. At the time of release, it was available on floppy disk, but as Kenza Cytronic no longer sells these, I'm pretty sure this one is just available on cassette, or you can at least grab a free digital download of it. Now, there is no denying that enemy sprites move very quickly in this game. As long as you learn their wave pattern attacks, you might be fine playing this, but still it is extremely speedy. Just take a look at the gameplay. Bump into bubbles, which will give you weapon power-ups, but avoid grey bubbles, as these will instantly kill you. Other bubbles give you speed-ups. Definitely worth a play for a freebie. If you love games like Jupiter Lander, quite likely you will love Robot Jet Action. Obviously a totally different game, but the control mechanics are very similar to it. By pressing down on fire, our cute little robot boosts with his jetpack. By letting go, he then drops. Released as a free game in 2022 by C64 Portal.pl Games, and it's definitely a challenging game. Again, to such a high standard and quality that one might presume this wasn't a C64 game, but a console game. We have a choice of several different worlds to play with this game, each themed differently and each world being more challenging than the other. The aim is to collect goodies and wait for a portal to open, which takes us to the next stage in the world. It's one of those games where you will lose your when dying. There is actually a sequel to this game currently being developed for the Commodore Amiga too. Knights in Slimes is a game for people with a liking for a bubble and pang. That's how I would describe this Monty Boy's 2023 release. Another higher quality Commodore 64 game that gives us a character selection screen, a fair few options for the game itself. It's a simple case of bumping into enemies on the screen such as slimes, skeletons and other monsters, which then breaks them apart. Once everything is cleared, we then move to the next stage. There are several worlds here, but not selectable from the get-go. In order to progress, each world needs to be finished in order to move on. It's an arcade-inspired game that wouldn't have looked at a place in a typical arcade in the 1980s. This one can be purchased either digitally or in physical form. Another quality Cytronic release here with 2012 Soulless. I remember the build-up for this game over on the Lemon 64 forums. Being fairly new to the modern day Commodore 64 scene at the time, I'd not long got my teeth into another particular release. This game then releases. It had some criticism initially due to being a game with no weapons to use, and largely we are searching treasures for bits and pieces to help aid us in the game. I'd imagine fans of 1988's budget Zeppelin release a Draconis would likely like this game as it's very similar. There's also a sequel to this known as Soulless 2 Armor of Gods, which is roughly the same game but a little more on the Sacred Armor of Antrath side. It's a fun and ridiculously long game with a saving option and checkpoints throughout. It's currently $5.99 on the Cytronic itch.io store. It was also originally released on disc too. Run and Gun is a short but very awesome, well made, run and gun game. It released in 2023 and was a little different to everything else released at the time, and it is a very enjoyable game. It's a case of some mild exploration, finding keys to open up doors, dodge enemies, and well, a game of this style really. I must admit the control layout is a little bit on the strange side, in that in order to fire with this game you need to hold the joystick down, but you get used to it, and it's a great game by Thalamus Digital for $1.99. I highly recommend this one. Fans of the classic ZX Spectrum game Jetpack will absolutely love Rocket Smash X for the Commodore 64. The idea is fairly simple: collect parts for your spaceship as they fall down from space, and then dump them to start rebuilding your ship again to make it fully functional, which then blasts us off to the next stage. It's a fairly lengthy game, and this was released by RGCD and Cytronic on cartridge. It also came on floppy disk too. Regardless, you can download a digital copy of Rocket Smash X for free over on itch.io. It's a very addictive game, and like I say, fans of a certain Spectrum game will absolutely love this one. It's a fairly awesome game, and one of the few Commodore 64 games that I have actually ever completed.
Get ready.
I referred to Sarah Jane Avery as the best modern day coder of shoot 'em ups for the C64. Now this is Zeta Wing 2. As you can see, it looks like it's been heavily inspired from games such as Gemini Wing, with its own twist added. It's a classy vertical scrolling shooter with some very impressive multi-layer parallax scrolling added. If you know much about assembly language, then you will know this takes some brains to achieve it to this standard. We have an option menu here with difficulty settings and other bits and pieces. This game released by Sarah Jane Avery's Witchsoft label in 2023. You can also buy this on itch.io, which is currently priced at $4.99. It's definitely worth the money for a fresh new vertical scrolling shooter. It's extremely high in quality. The Commodore 64 recently received SNK vs Capcom. Obviously this isn't an SNK or Capcom release, but it is a remarkable achievement with how well this game actually plays. Likely one of the best, if not best games to date on the Commodore 64 for this genre. It has a new Commodore 128 version too, which just enhances the game just a tad. The footage you see is from a stock C64 though. The controls are very nice with options to change from 1 or 2 buttons for action. I don't need to say much more about a game like this, but it has a good story mode and tournament mode. Hit collision detection is just incredible here. If you were disappointed with Street Fighter 2 in the early 1990s for C64, this is the game you need as a form of compensation. It's free, and I seriously urge any beat 'em up fan to try this one. Soul Force is another Sarah Jane Avery game. This one was published by the German publisher Protovision back in 2020. It's a standard horizontal scrolling shooter with class. Avery has proven that she is a game designer and coder of some talent. Soul Force is an incredibly long game. I once played it for around almost an hour with only a few deaths. This game lasts. It's got impressive visuals, colourful backdrops with lovely parallax scrolling added. Music is really nice here, and we also get weapon upgrades as we shoot down enemies. It has a storyline which is nicely implemented between stages with animations. It also comes with an options menu and saving option. I think you might need the save option for Soul Force. This is available from Protovision's website directly as a physical or digital release, or from the Protovision itch.io store. This Protovision release was a much anticipated one for 2023, bizarre in theme as we play as an anthropomorphic pig, but without a doubt a seriously high in quality production, which is available in digital form or physical media from the Protovision store. The game centres around Frank Further as you explore 5 huge worlds, boosting over 200 screens with some very impressive SID music added. The aim in each differently themed world is to fight your way through puzzles and collect keys to open chests containing items to help you, ultimately to take on bosses. The game is kind of set up like an RPG where enemies have a life gauge. It actually won the C64 Gold Medal Award through its sheer impressiveness and its amazing animated cutscenes. I will warn you, this game is particularly difficult, but you can change difficulty settings. Sam's Journey was one of 2017's biggest and best games and widely anticipated by many people prior to its release. The hype around this Protovision release was definitely worth it in all ways. Many will continuously state that Mayhem in Monsterland is the best looking Commodore 64 game. Well, it once was, and then Sam's Journey released. A box disc edition comes with 2 floppy disks and other goodies and is also available from Protovision's itch.io store. It's currently $23.99 for a digital release and is absolutely well worth it. If you thought Nightingale was a big game, this beats it with over 2,000 screens containing 27 massive levels. It's obviously inspired by console style games such as Super Mario World, and I personally say that if I didn't know better, this was more or less a 16-bit looking SNES game. It's highly polished, a very long game with a fair difficulty level behind it. It was also released on the Nintendo NES around a year back. Personally, I prefer it on the Commodore 64, as a game like this really shouldn't exist on a stock C64. In fact, when this game was originally announced, many people thought it was a joke because of the sheer quality and scale of the game. But here we are, one of the finest platformers ever made for the C64, and I highly recommend this to anybody who enjoys Super Mario World themed games. One of my favourite websites known as Indie Retro News actually made this game of the year 2017. It's truly a spectacle to behold and a major milestone in Commodore 64 game programming. This is a game which totally saw me back into the Commodore 64 again back in 2009 when this released by Cytronic. I had this on physical disc at the time, as of which Cytronic don't sell anymore due to floppy disk shortages. At the time, and being fairly new to Commodore 64, after a massive gap, I had to buy a disk drive to play this. The first drive I bought was way out of alignment, so bought another and eventually managed to get an alignment program. I will say here that with disk drives, the most reliable for me was the Accelerator Plus third-party Commodore 64 disk drive. Anyways, Nightingale itself is a Metroidvania style game, which does it on a huge scale for a C64 game, that is. It boosts over 200 screens so you can upgrade weapons and armor, fight bosses that are impressively designed. Pressing spacebar accesses a menu to change weapons and armor. This is a huge game that starts slow, but you will come back for more. It also has a save system too. You can buy this one digitally for just $4.99, and it comes with another awesome bonus game, which is titled Very Well, which is also a really good game. For this price, this game will keep you going for some time. It's a massive game to play. I think Nightingale was one of the first aftermarket games to go this big in scale for a C64 game. It's very impressive. It's also at this point that I realised Commodore 64 games were still being produced, so this game will be remembered by this. If my first Commodore 64 gaming experience originally was Limbo's Quest, then I would happily say, on a personal level, Nightingale was my second experience. And that's it for my top 20 aftermarket or modern day C64 games. There is a lot there which I've not included. These are literally the games I'll keep coming back to. Now, if you've not watched my top 10 C64 games, which I uploaded around a week ago, do check that one out. I'll leave the link in my comments section. Let us know if you agree with this list. Like I say, this is a personal top 20, and by no means is this an official list, just my personal favourites. Anyways, until next video comes, thanks for watching.